So I will apologize. This week, our microphone died during the first segment, and we didn't realize it until the end of the recording. So bear with me, and hopefully this makes sense. Hi, welcome to this week's meal on a budget. We did spend a little bit more than I usually like to spend. We spent $22.68 for the Mexican chicken that we are going to be making this week. But we will have enough to feed 4 people. So chicken is fairly expensive. I spent $9.91 for this chicken, but it's 2 fairly large chicken breast halves. We're going to slice those in half, turn it into 4 pieces, then it'll go well with the rice. I also, per my ingredient insight video, I have a taco seasoning kit. It's $2.69 for this kit. It's cheaper than by individual spices. You can use it in the rice to coat the chicken, as well as into the vegetables that we're going to finish the meal off with. So the first step in our meal today is going to be actually making our rice. So we didn't have to buy any of the ingredients because last week we still have plenty of brown rice left, as well as our stock. We have about 2 cups of stock, so we are going to use 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of stock. Because we're doing a Spanish style rice, I am going to chop up an onion, which cost me 61 cents today. I will chop it up, starting in a little bit of oil. Once it is sauteed and a little bit more translucent, I'm going to take half of the onion out, put it into a dish so that we can put it into our vegetables later on. So we want half of the onion for the rice and half of it for the vegetables. So we'll get the onion ready, get everything going, and we'll be back in just a second. So I've chopped up the onion, I've sauteed it a little bit, half of this to go in our vegetables. I have rinsed our brown rice, and I have that ready here. I'm going to toss that into the onions. There we go. Stir the onions into the rice. Then that is when I'll add 1 tablespoon of that taco seasoning that we bought, and that will give the rice a lot of extra flavor without a lot of extra work involved. Be aware that if you have issues with hypertension, high blood pressure, go with a less sodium taco seasoning. I just bought the standard one, but they are typically the same price at the grocery store. So I've got the flavoring mixed in here. I do have 2 cups left of our broth that we used the other day. I'm going to pour all of that in, stir it up. And obviously our broth is going to look a little off color because of that taco seasoning. Just means more flavor for everybody, right? Stir that up so that all of that gets combined together. Put it on the stove with the lid on it. Once it boils, bring it to simmer for 35 to 45 minutes, depending on how long the rice takes to cook. And we'll be back in a minute to get the chicken started. And we're back. So now we're going to get the chicken prepped. I'll show you how to do the breading station in a minute, but we have some fairly thick chicken pieces here. So I like to just take off the chicken tender. If you have kids, this is a perfect time to do that, so then you don't add the spice to those pieces. So take off the small chicken tenders. You don't even need a knife to do that wonderful little there. So then these are fairly thick pieces. So take a nice sharp knife. I like putting it on a piece of plastic wrap just because it slides a lot less that way. Keep your fingers out of the way. Knife is very sharp. And then just slice through, keeping your fingers out of the way. And that will bring you to really good size chicken breast. Not quite cutlets because we're not pounding them, but it'll give us a nice even surface and a nice even thickness for cooking. I'll cut this one up and then we'll get the breading station ready with the tortilla chips. So we have our 4 pieces of chicken breast half as well as our chicken tenders and the singing birds in the background. So now we're going to get the breading station set up. Typically people bread with egg because that moisture allows whatever you're breading it with to stick. I'm not going to use any eggs. I don't want to have any additional cost. So I'm going to use a little bit of the oil. I've got some of it in here in my bowl. Then I will take half a tablespoon of your seasoning, your taco seasoning from earlier. So what that's going to do is it's going to give something for the breading, our corn chips, to adhere to, and it'll also put that seasoning onto our chicken. If you were going to do the tenders without the seasoning for the little ones, I would have dipped it into the oil first just so that it had something to adhere to without putting the seasoning in. But we'll move forward with that. So then we need to prepare our tortilla chips. So you can use flour, cornmeal, breadcrumbs if you wanted to, but I spent $3.99 on this huge bag of tortilla chips. We are going to use it for a recipe later, probably into December, but we're going to take the tortilla chips. Again, just like the taco seasoning, be aware of the extra salt that's on the tortilla chips versus breadcrumbs, but they're very tasty. They add a lot of flavor, and you can always have a little bit of snack while you're cooking as well. $3.99, and we're not going to be using many of them. You can create the crumbs from the tortilla chips in a plastic bag, in a professional food processor if you have. I have this hand crank food processor that I was given. So you just put them in. If you want it really crunchy, more like a panko, you can leave them a little bit more whole. We'll continue with grinding these up until they're the consistency I want, and we'll be back to bread these in just a second. So we've got all of our corn chips that we need for today crumbled. If you wanted to, you can crunch them a little bit more. I like them being on the bigger side. My oven is now preheated, as you can tell. I like them being a little bit crunchier, so I leave them more whole. Typically, I would season my meat now, salt and pepper, but because we're using the taco seasoning, we don't need to do that step. We will just dip it into our seasoning there with the oil, which is what's going to help the corn chips adhere. I cannot do the one hand wet, one hand dry. It has never worked for me. And just press it in gently. And as you can see, we now have corn chip breading. So we'll go and continue these. The oven is preheated to 350 degrees. We will get these in and get them started. And then I'll walk you through what we're going to do with our corn to add a little bit of Mexican zing to it. So we now have our chicken in the oven with the corn chips on it. We have our rice cooking. So it's about another half hour for that to be ready. So we're going to get started on our Mexican corn. So as I mentioned previously, shortcuts, if they're worth the value for your money, I would do it. I did buy a can of the Mexican style corn. It's corn, some chili peppers, and sweet red pepper. Why, when they think they put red pepper into something and consider it Mexican, I don't know, but it seems to work for most people. So I like this blend, but we do have those onions that I fried up earlier, that half of an onion. So I'm going to put that in to my pan. I'm going to put a half a tablespoon of the taco seasoning into that and let those saute a little bit longer. I do have about 2 tablespoons of this, so I'm going to seal it. You can always put it into the freezer to make it last for a little bit longer. We'll end up using that somewhere along the line in the next week or so. So then I'll just toss that corn in, and it's that easy. We're going to get this heated up once the rice and the chicken are ready. You'll have 2 options on how you wanted to serve it. You could do a Mexican fried rice and stir this in to the cooked rice. I think I'll keep it separate today, but for ease of freezing, if you wanted to make this ahead of time and freeze it, put it all into one container. It all ends up in the same place, but it has the same flavor profiles. So we will be back in about half an hour. Not for videos, but I'll be back in half an hour when everything is ready to be plated. And we're back. The rice didn't take as long to cook today as it normally does. Our chicken was in the oven for about 20 minutes. Just keep an eye on it because we slice them in half. It will cook a little bit quicker. And to show you how I would typically plate this up, so we have the chicken where the corn chips have stayed nice and adhered to it. We have our rice with the onions and the taco seasoning, so it's a flavorful rice. If you don't like it as spicy, put a little bit less of the taco seasoning kit. We have our corn mix with that onion, and again, more of that taco seasoning. A little bit of that on the side there. I did spend $1.99 on some green onions, so I would just put a little bit of that on top, just more for pretty than anything else. We have some extra corn chips, so if you wanted them on the side, I would also then put, if you have salsa or some sour cream at home, put a little dish of that on the plate. So that is what our dish looks like. We have our rice, our chicken coated in corn chips, as well as our Mexican corn with onions and the taco seasoning. We did spend $2.28. No, I apologize. $22.68 for this. But we have almost an entire bag of corn chips available. I do still have some green onions left, which unfortunately green onions do not last in the fridge for very long. So I'm probably going to use that tomorrow, or just eat it with a little bit of salt, or dipping it into some sour cream and salsa. But $22.68, a meal of 4, and likely some leftovers. Enjoy, and I hope this helps extend your budget just that little bit.